RotoGrinders. I am not Britt. I am Dean. I'm filling in for Britt one more time. Britt is hanging out there in Disney. This is the Prime Points Show, Week 14 Fantasy Points Show. You got Graham Barfield. You got Jay Tribbey, both of Prime Points, Fantasy Points. Happy to be back. Happy to knock it out. Week 14. It's a first look podcast. You know, we have 13 weeks of data now. We're going to give a quick peek as far as what we learned from week 13. Some stands going forward. If you're in the underdog prize pick streets, we got some winners there. We have some just straight sportsbooks picks as well. Britt did give me access to his winners. I know he's been super hot. We'll take a peek as well at the DFS slate. Tuesday night, lots of news to fall, but a first look as well. But Jake, Graham, welcome to the show. We're at the quarter pole. We got 13 weeks of data. You guys must love that over there over at Fantasy Points for sure, because we're always dealing with small samples, but the samples are getting bigger. How are you? How do we feel about week 14?
Yeah,
let's talk about week 13 briefly.
Yeah, good, man. This is a interesting slate, Jake. You know, I know you grind on the DFS early look as well, early in this, it's Tuesday, but we've got 10 games this week with totals at 41 or below. A lot of fun. We've got 2 games with totals at 30 and 30 and a half. That's like the second time, actually the third time that's happened since 2000. Just unbelievable low totals this week. Luckily, we have some good games in the afternoon window and then, good Sunday night game to kind of save us. But yeah, this is going to be a really rough week. I know we kind of focus on, DFS and prop betting on the show. I will say this is going to be a really rough week for seasonals too. We only have 2 teams out on bye, but with all these low scoring games, I think this is, it's been a low scoring season. It's going to be a really, really low scoring week just in general this week.
No Arizona, no Washington. They're off this week. If they didn't come back, would anybody notice? Would anybody? Oh wait, where did Washington go? They're just going like a vacation the last 4 weeks this season. Who would even know? Jake, your thoughts? We're going to talk about week 14 in a second. A little bit of a look back as far as week 13, and I'm not a big college football guy, but I imagine this is kind of sort of like the Iowa stuff. I can't help but notice the Iowa lines. Two games this week at 30 and a half. I'll have a take as far as the Thursday night game soon enough. We'll talk about New England. Who is New England playing? I forgot now.
Pittsburgh. Yeah, trust me, I don't want to think about this game either, Dean. It's pretty brutal. It is brutal.
Zappy, Trubisky, Clam Chowder, Primanti Brothers. You can keep all of it. I don't want any of that nonsense. I'm not. Well, we'll talk about it in a second briefly. But what do we have here? Jake, as far as week 13, we'll talk about week 14 in a second, but we one of the first things you do is a takeaway as far as week 13. What did we learn? What do we know now after 13 weeks of data?
Yeah, so my week 13 takeaway was that this AFC wildcard race is going to be pretty fun. Per PFF, there are 8 AFC teams that have a 10% chance or higher to make the playoffs as a wildcard team. None of those teams have a playoff probability over 60%. So it's really tight between about half the AFC. And of those 8 teams, 4 of them are currently working with a backup quarterback. And that doesn't even include the recent injury to Trevor Lawrence, as the Jags are pretty likely to win their division at this point. So we could have some really strange or exciting wildcard round matchups in the AFC, especially if you like backup quarterbacks. This will be a pretty interesting race here on in one half of the NFL.
Last we saw, is Trevor Lawrence still walking to the MRI machine? Has he finally got a ride? Has anybody picked him up?
I don't think the cart has still arrived. He is still just limbering with a cop and an athletic trainer into the locker room. That was absolutely wild. I'm a Jags fan, and I don't know why there wasn't a cart. I don't know why he wasn't with 2 athletic trainers. Bizarre, super bizarre. But Jake, AFC, man. What do you think, real quick? What do you think about the Colts? I think they're like the Colts and Steelers are like the teams. Obviously the Browns with Flacco too, but there's like 3 teams that they're on the fringe, but I mean, they're legitimately in the race. Like of the Colts, Steelers, Browns, like who do you think is the strongest? Those are, I think, the 3 like kind of weakest of the, the teams that are in the true contention here.
I want to say Colts just because I like their quarterback the most out of that group. If you told me Joe Flacco was starting for the rest of the year for the Browns, I might lean Cleveland, but
what a sentence.
I like Indianapolis the most out of that group. I think they're the most fun to watch too. So
Steichen is great, man. Steichen is so sharp. I've put this out, but I think Anthony Richardson next year. Like if his shoulder is healthy, like we're going to be all in like with this team. I mean, Colts are just, they've beat expectation almost every single week. Picked up another win last week. I'm with you on that. AFC South, like this is insane how competitive the AFC South is. I mean, we thought this would be, one of the worst divisions, but ironically, it's turned out to be one of the best. Obviously, CJ Stroud is a big part of that. But my takeaway from this past week, sticking in the AFC, I mean, the Chargers offense is just broken. I'm not, breaking ground here. Obviously, Herbert's out there with one good receiver in Keenan. Quentin Johnston is getting open, but dropping passes at least. Man, I mean, they don't have any good tight ends. Austin Eckler, great player, all-time great fantasy player, but he's still clearly less than 100%. Over at Fantasy Points Data, we chart missed tackles forced, and Austin Eckler's numbers are really, really poor across the season. Like for fantasy, season long, you're still starting him, if you've gotten this far, but efficiency-wise, I mean, he is fourth from last in missed tackles forced. Only like Zeke and Latavius Murray are worst. Hopefully Eckler can get back healthy next year, but I mean, this Chargers offense is just broken, and it's kind of killed Justin Herbert. He had like a really good ceiling to start the season, even after Mike Williams got hurt, and then they lost Josh Palmer, who's probably going to be on IR for the rest of the year. Man, Chargers are looking really rough, and it's just slate wide. This is another team that we were kind of relying on to be really good for fantasy this year, and they've obviously petered out for all the injuries. It's going to be a pretty brutal week, and we're just continue to have players drop like flies. Jags are now 3-point dogs in Cleveland. Trevor Lawrence is going to play, so this is going to be kind of a messy slate. And for DFS, we'll get there. I think there's going to be a lot of concentrated ownership on 3 games this week, really.
When I saw that play for Eckler, I'm sure you saw the play on Twitter a couple weeks ago where it looked like he was going to break away down the sideline, and he was caught by I don't know, a D lineman or somebody tracked him down pretty easily. It's like, oh man, this is not good. And I don't want to have like that one takeaway, but like it certainly does feel like something's wrong there with Eckler. Like you said, fabulous play. Seems like a great dude. I know he does fantasy as well, and probably post career he'll be in this field as well. But it feels like it's over, and that whole offense entirely just feels pretty broken. My takeaway was I had a couple. But it wasn't really a takeaway. It's a question. My question is Jordan Love good now? Jordan Love's been really, really solid of late. I actually asked this on Twitter. Twitter never prisoner of the moment on Twitter. According to Twitter, is Jordan Love good now? This is after his game on Sunday night. 43% of the people said yes. Now, if I asked this a month ago, it would be like maybe 3%, 5%, 10%. I don't know. But 43% of the people responded, said yes. 12% said no. 37% said, I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know. I'm just throwing my hands up. And the rest is for people just want the results, which come on, don't be a coward. Take a chance. Click on something, but fair enough. Some people just want to see what the results are. What are you guys seeing? Is there anything that we're looking at when it comes to Love? Why is he so much better right now? It's just small sample stuff, Jake. Is he going to be good? Is Green Bay going to have 3 consecutive Hall of Fame quarterbacks? Who knows? But your current state of Jordan Love.
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly been playing better recently, and I do think there's something to the idea that, the Packers being the youngest team in the NFL, they've finally started hitting their stride these last few weeks. I don't think anyone would be surprised if they did put together a pretty good second half of the year. At the same time, I mean, we have a 2-game sample of Jordan Love looking like a good player. I mean, I don't think anyone would be surprised if he went back to the Jordan Love at the beginning of the season where ball location was a major issue for him, was missing a ton of throws. But yeah, I think, there's plenty of reasons to be encouraged about Jordan Love, but I'm not willing to make a, too black and white of a statement about him just quite yet.
He's just such an interesting, Rorschach test, it really depends on what you see kind of,
yeah.
The Chiefs game was really impressive. I go back to Christian Watson missing pretty much all the preseason again. He has missed so much time practice wise, and Watson finally getting fully healthy midseason. They've established a little bit of a rapport, and offense kind of takes off. We all saw Christian Watson's incredible deep skills last year with Rodgers, and we've seen it in small sample with Jordan Love. He's great in the end zone too. Of course, he's now dealing with another hamstring injury and a long list of hamstring injuries. But yeah, to Jake's point, I mean, it's really if you look back, zoom out. I always default to clean pocket efficiency. What can you give me? What's the best way to kind of level the playing field for quarterbacks? And looking at clean pocket efficiency, I mean, Jordan Love has been kind of bottom of the barrel all season, but yeah, definitely playing a lot better now. I think the Packers absolutely it's kind of what we've seen in general with these, rookie quarterbacks besides CJ Stroud. They're all kind of inconsistent at the very least. I mean, Packers are, in the absolute hunt for the NFC wild card. And I think they've seen more than enough to build around Love for next year. But yeah, they've got to get some more receiver help. And, obviously losing Luke Musgrave has not helped too. Aaron Jones is, 28 and popped his hammy and hasn't been the same, suffered a knee injury too. I mean, it's kind of been a lot of different things impacting this offense, but I do think there's enough long-term for Love to have potentially be something there, at least for fantasy this year. Jake, this well. I mean, his floor has been good. Rushing's been okay. It's kind of been like the Sam Howell effect, like he'll get it done. It doesn't always look pretty, but he gets there. I think there's enough here talent-wise for Love in the long term, but I'm still like skeptical if he's like a good quarterback yet. Yeah.
Taking a peek at the season-long schedule, at the Giants Monday night, then Tampa at home, a good matchup there. This is for like your season-long. I'm not a big season-long guy. I don't know if you guys will dabble in that streets or not, but it looks like it plays out pretty good if you're struggling for a quarterback. Giants, Tampa, at Carolina, at Minnesota, week 17, and then 18, I guess, doesn't matter against the Bears. I had one more thought, but one more sort of thing I want to throw out there. I spent like an hour of my day trying to figure out how this happened. And Mark Mosley, kicker, Mark Mosley won the NFL MVP in 1982 in a strike shortened season, nine game season. Like, how in the world does that happen? I still don't quite know. But he made 20 of 21 field goals. Good for him. At the time, it was the longest consecutive field goal streak. He made 20 consecutive field goals. Washington beat the Giants on one of his walk-off field goals, like a 40-yarder. The people went crazy. Prison of the moment, I don't know. He did miss 3 extra points. His longest kick was 48 yards. Why am I talking about this? Because there's more NFL MVP kickers than there are wide receivers. We've never had an MVP wide receiver. Yep. If ever we're going to break that barrier, no, like Tyreek is good. Well, you're the offensive player of the year, Tyreek, and then let's just rename these things then. To stop calling it MVP if we're going to separate it. I'm just saying, if ever it's going to happen, it should be this year. Tyreek, we saw he absolutely smashed and didn't even do anything in the second half. Basically, he didn't have to because Washington did not punch back. But and I don't really care about Hall of Fame MVP arguments and all that. But seriously, like, this is silly. Tyreek is you can argue like 4 or 5 other quarterbacks if you want to have that conversation. But Jake, Graham, do we have a take as far as MVPs? Do we care about this? For what it's worth, the current favorite is Dak, Purdy, and Hurts. They're all basically 3-1, 4-1, depending on where you're shopping. It's always quarterbacks, right? Mahomes is 7.5-1, Tua's 10-1, and Tyreek is, you can get him at 16-1 right now on DraftKings because he's not going to win because they just don't give it to receivers no matter what he does. He's going to get 2,000 yards, but there you go. I just wanted to, my little soapbox here. I don't know how he's not at least in the conversation, but hey, we're going to give him Offensive Player of the Year. Just be happy with that, I suppose.
Yeah, I think the big issue is just with how the award is titled. I mean, when you say most valuable player, that's just always going to end up being a quarterback. If they change it to most outstanding player, offensive player of the year, obviously, like you mentioned, that should be Tyreek Hill. I've never seen a player jump off the screen like Tyreek Hill does. I mean, maybe 2019 MVP Lamar Jackson, but I mean, nobody moves like Tyreek Hill. It really is incredible. And it is a shame, kind of like you touched on, Dean, that, he just is ineligible for MVP because of this position.
Yeah. You guys have a take as far as like the Aline, Prescott, Purdy, Hurts? It seems like none of them are great. It's just kind of like a 3-sided coin at this point.
I've been on Dak. On Dak. I think it's Dak. I mean, just the way he's playing and elevating these guys. I mean, man.
Yeah, I am a bag holder. I got him at 28-1 like 4 weeks ago. So I'm really hoping it's Dak.
I think it might come down to Sunday night football versus Philly.
If
he puts on a good show there.
Absolutely. Yeah. That game in the Dallas, I mean, they got to play Buffalo too. I mean, they've got some premier games coming up. They're going to keep chucking it. Dak is just, it's Dot show. Like after Dot show, every single week he's been awesome. Like awesome.
Yeah, he's been spectacular for sure. And I was kind of like on the fence with him. Like I always thought he got too much crap, but certainly he's sticking it to anybody that sort of spoke poorly about him this year. He's been spectacular for sure. We'll see. We're kind of at the quarter pole. We're going to see how they close, but it'll be interesting to monitor that. Let's talk about taking a stand. Graham, what is your stand going into this week?
Yeah, taking a stand against a team we've been betting against all season. This one's kind of easy. We'll talk through it. I think Britt's on this as well. I was checking the show sheet before the show. I believe he is. Yes, he is. So Britt and I will be both taking a stand on a bet later in the show here.
All right. I'm gonna. But my stand was I'm just not watching Thursday Night Football. I'm not.
Same.
I know if you're still listening to the show, week 14, you obviously love football. You're grinding football. You don't have to watch it just because it's on. You don't have to do that. You don't have to watch Zappy versus Trubisky. The NBA in-season tournament's going on Thursday night. You probably have Netflix. DM me. I'll give you a movie suggestion. Nobody's going to hold it against you if you don't watch Zappy and Trubisky. You can take a week off. What about yourself, Graham? What is your take? What is your stand this week?
I think, Graham already gave a stand. So
I'm sorry. I apologize.
You're good. So I was going to say, I'm ready to load up on a Browns wide receiver in DFS if the GOAT, Joe Flacco, makes another start in week 14.
I love it. That is a good segue, right? Let's talk about the DFS rundown. Because, Jake, are we assuming, I'm sure you know this, right? The Elijah Moore thing is just 258? Was that the error total that I saw he had last week, the biggest number on the season? And people were talking about how they had the chemistry back in the day for the Jets. I guess they made chemistry pretty quickly. And this is what we're down to. We've already said positive things about Joe Flacco twice on this show. Smash the over on that. Pay off that ticket for sure. But continue the thought there as far as praising Joe Flacco.
Yeah. So 48% of Joe Flacco's passes traveled over 10 air yards last week, which is just insane. I mean, if you watch the offense with DTR, they weren't doing anything downfield. They clearly didn't trust him with downfield throws. It was a totally different offense with Joe Flacco out there. Amari Cooper also got concussed, and that led to career highs for Elijah Moore in both targets and expected fantasy points in week 13. Of course, he didn't convert all those expected fantasy points into actual fantasy points, but I would imagine if Flacco starts this week, I mean, Elijah Moore, I believe he's only 4,500. He's going to be very popular in DFS. It's, here at Fantasy Points, we've been huge Elijah Moore fans the entire time he's been in the NFL. Week 14 could be a very exciting week for the entire staff if Joe Flacco ends up making a start. Some other guys I was eyeing in DFS. I mean, Justin Fields at 6,800. That's already pretty tempting. And then you factor in that he's playing a Lions defense that's allowed 30 DraftKings fantasy points per game and 16 rushing fantasy points per game to opposing mobile quarterbacks over the last 2 seasons. That includes previous games against Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. The total's down in that Lions-Bears game a bit, I believe, because of weather concerns. This time of year in Chicago, it's always pretty brutal. But, Fields stacked with DJ Moore. I mean, the ceiling on those two is just incredible. And then my only other major note is Kyron Williams and Zach Moss are both ridiculously underpriced given their workloads. I mean, these are guys who are seeing, 90% of their team snaps, 85 to 90% of total backfield usage. Just incredible workloads for both players. Arguably, both are 1,000 too cheap. Really, really clear values, I think, at the running back position.
The Moss thing did not work out last week, but process versus results, 90% of the snaps, at least in the backfield. I think he had 7 goal line touches, which is, or at least, within the 10, which is outrageous. I would imagine if that didn't lead the week, it's on the Family Feud board, if nothing else. And by all means, I'm going to go back to it. And I understand why you didn't play him for, ownership reasons. Jake, Graham, did you guys load up on Moss as well? Did you take a stand on it? Did you go somewhere in the middle?
I did not, and I didn't play a lot of Moss, honestly. I'm usually fading chalk, and that's killed me all year. But at least last week I got a win against Moss.
Yeah, I was playing him in higher dollar single entry stuff, and then got off him a bit in larger fields.
Yeah. Well, in higher dollar single entry was 75, 80%, something like that.
He was 85% in the 555. It was insane.
Yeah, he was I think 90% owned in some of the single entry stuff I was playing on FanDuel. So unfortunately we can't feed our family with XFP though. I mean that's the bad problem. I will say, just looking ahead here, it's Tuesday. We're dealing with a lot of injuries. There's also some weather concerns. There's a big storm moving across the East Coast. Obviously it's Tuesday. I'm not a meteorologist. I'll leave that to Kevin Roth over here at RotoGrinders, who's great. Just keep that in the back of your mind for this week. Chris Olave, though, especially if we get Jameis Winston, I think everybody's going to be trying to jam in some Olave. It's just fun. Jameis is just fun. He's just like, he's going to chuck it deep. He's going to throw it across the field. He's going to try to jam it into tight windows. And he's also probably going to throw a few picks and just donate some possessions to the Panthers. Saints, playing in a dome again, should be kind of some wet weather looking like on the East Coast. So clean game there. And again, one guy I was on last week was Deebo Samuel, especially on FanDuel, where you kind of chasing a little more touchdown equity over there. Once again, I think it's just Deebo week straight up. I prefer him to Ayuk straight up again. Deebo, always smashes against zone. Seattle plays, 4th, 5th highest rated zone coverage. Deebo had a great game against Seattle last week. I think the ownership will finally come up for Deebo this week, but I'll be in on that again. And I love that Fields call, Jake. I'm really interested to see what the field thinks of Fields this week, because he looks to me like right now, like the absolute best quarterback on the board. And obviously we're going to be waiting on weather, but that game obviously has just massive shootout potential too if it is clean.
Yeah, I was chatting with Ryan about this earlier, and I do think Fields is going to be crazy popular, but Josh Dobbs would be an interesting pivot. If you still want to play a rushing quarterback at a little bit cheaper. I was talking to Ryan specifically about Battle Royale, where Justin Fields is going to be 100% owned, and a guy like Josh Dobbs is going to be 1%. So, I think that could be an interesting pivot there.
Like that.
I was looking for a number for like our, fantasy pick 'em play for, underdog and prize picks. I was looking for a number on his over for rushing yards, and you guys kind of hinted at it. 18 carries, 104 yards versus Detroit this season earlier, and I couldn't find one. So, it's obviously Tuesday night and it'll be released at some point, but probably somewhere around 50-ish. I don't know, just throwing out a number. I'm curious where that's going to land.
I think it might be 56 because it was 48.5 the last time they played Detroit, and I'm a donkey and didn't bet it. There's a bunch of sharps for on 48.5. It'll probably push 60, I bet. I mean, it's such a strong spot. Like Jake was saying, Detroit's been so bad against mobile quarterbacks for so long.
I think the market's catching up to that narrative a little bit, but I don't know if Detroit's going to be, willing
it might
to
not matter.
that. Yeah, I was chatting with one of our data charters earlier, and he was like, "Look, Aaron Glenn, the Detroit defensive coordinator, that's just a scheme. That's just what he does. So, that they might just let Fields run all over him again."
What is the highest number you'd bet the over on still? I mean, not to hold you to it, but like, would you bet over on 60 in a vacuum?
That's a lot for a quarterback.
Yeah,
it's
60's tough. I think high 50s, I'd still be pretty tempted, but 60's tough.
You mentioned Kevin Roth. I'm not a meteorologist either, but I saw on Scores and Odds he was talking about it's Chicago, Cincinnati, and Cleveland.
Yeah.
And it's Tuesday night. I don't freak out about weather. I wait until this could be nothing. We'll see. And Vegas will dictate it as well. But Roth will let us know, and he'll give you an update. But yeah, Chicago, Cincinnati, Cleveland, all possible wind, weather issues.
Yeah, I think the books are on it. I think that's why we're seeing the totals so low. I mean, Ravens-Rams is 40.5. I mean, if there were no weather concerns, I think this would be at least 42.5, 43 at least. I mean, I know Ravens defense is good, but Rams have really started to pick up the steam here, especially with Kyron and Kupp and Nakua all healthy. I mean, these totals are really low. I think the books are kind of accounting for it.
So he wrote up under Jags Browns when it was 32, and since then it's dropped. It's dropped from 32.
Yeah, it's 30.5 now.
Yeah, which is but it's dropping from that was earlier today. That was at 11:12 on Tuesday afternoon, and it's since dropped 1.5 points. I think it's at 30.5 now.
Mostly, I bet you it's mostly Lawrence. Doesn't seem like he's going to play, but yeah.
Yeah, shortly. Yeah, that matters as well too, obviously. But just the overall. It's an 11-game slate. We got an extra game this week, right? Only 2 teams on bye. There's a Monday Night Football doubleheader.
Yep.
But it feels like it's at least on a Tuesday things change. It feels like it's smaller than 11 games. It's like I'm looking. I'm like, there's 11 games. Like, where's the good stuff? Like, what am I getting excited about here?
It's all in the afternoon window this week. We got Bills, Chiefs, Niners, Seahawks, strong total 46.5 there. Broncos, Chargers could be hot too. So honestly, Jake and I talk about this a lot. This is a pretty good week to if you are a big DFS player, to kind of split up some of your entries between the early and afternoon, because you'll get some good lineup variation. And this early window could be absolutely trash, with all these low totals. So just a parting DFS thought there for this week, especially with this 1 p.m. slate looking so bad right now.
I was thinking about that. I was thinking of the same exact thing. I'm like, how do you make a 1 p.m. lineup? Like 1 p.m. only? You got 7 games to work with, and it's like, man, it's a whole bunch of nonsense. And like, I think lineups are probably going to be backloaded because the more appealing games, all of them seem to be landing in that 4 o'clock window. Anything else DFS wise we should mention, or shall we move on? You got anything, Jake? You got anything, Graham?
I could give a quick shout out to Rashee Rice, who over the last 2 weeks, 20th in expected fantasy points per game, 15th in actual fantasy points per game, and 11th in targets per game among wide receivers. 5,400 on DraftKings prices the wide receiver 30, with plenty of room for that role to grow. So I imagine he'll get steamed. He'll probably be pretty chalky this week. I mean, if you project him for, an 85% route share, which, might be a little too aggressive given how Kansas City's played him. I mean, he's probably looking at 10 or 11 targets. So yeah, Rashee Rice, I think, is going to be quite popular.
And that route share keeps creeping up though. 47% and 52, 63. Then last week's season high, 67%. I mean, if we can get him just into the mid 70s weekly, the last couple weeks here, he's already a really good wide receiver 3 for fantasy, and you could push wide receiver 2. He's their only guy that gives them anything after the catch. I mean, these guys are just awful.
Oh yeah, on a per route basis, he's earning as many targets as Travis Kelce, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown. I mean, his targets per route run is absurd.
Yeah.
Well, how did it take this long is the question, right? Having to beat out Tony and Watson and Moore and MVS and Richie James, and it's not exactly a who's who there in the wide receiver room, but it feels like he's on the rise, and he's the top, a nice price to be in the most appealing game probably in this slate. A little bit of back and forth there with Buffalo and KC. The Dallas game out of the main slate. So as far as the main slate, probably the most appealing game. We do want to focus. We want to talk about a fantasy points. One of the tools there, the wide receiver coverage matchup. I'm not sure, Graham, did you want to talk about it, or did Jake want to talk about it? My apologies. I don't know who was there.
Yeah, I've got some notes on the coverage tool. This is our wide receiver coverage tool where it's still free. It's basically we're taking a look at on a per route basis what types of coverage receivers are going to face, and then just basically grading out how they perform against a certain type of coverages. And in general, Dean, I mean, we're seeing mosaics basically across the defenses. A lot of teams run a ton of different coverages. They're disguising their 1 high looks and jumping back into 2 high, and vice versa. Our data team does a fantastic job charting and making sure all these differences are accounted for. And basically this tool that we're going to look at here in a second is basically just like the boiled down version of all of that, just in one number, what's the best coverage grade. And yeah.
I'm not a hand in the dirt guy, but I hear people talk about cover 2. Like cover 2 is one of the reasons why big plays are being subdued this year. One of the reasons why scoring might be down overall. Is that something that's also baked into this sheet?
Yeah, in general, when we play, when defenses play too high, you're in general going to see just a shallower A dot. It's going to be deeper, fewer deep shots down the field. That's just generally speaking. So I think that's just kind of just a NFL wide note, but it really depends on the team too. There's certain teams certain quarterbacks that play significantly better against too high coverages.
All right, we're going to fire up this screen share here in just a second. We're going to see who pops. Graham, who's popping for me? I think Jake, actually, you're going to do the screen share, correct?
Yeah, I got the screen share up.
Thank you,
Graham, who did you want to talk about here?
Yeah, thank you, Jake. If you want to type in the Ravens in the search bar, please, sir. This is a really good spot in terms of coverage grade for Isaiah Likely. I imagine we didn't really touch on this really in the DFS segment. He's 3,500. He's going to be the mega chalk for DFS this week on DraftKings. But this is a really, really strong spot. Just in general, as we see, here from Mark Andrews, RIP, would have been a really great play this week. But, last week in his start, or 2 weeks ago now, counting for the Ravens bye, Likely set a season high in target share, led the team in receiving. I really think against the Rams here in this spot, we've been just spamming tight ends against the Rams all season. Last week, the Browns tight end group gave up kind of combined 8 for 72 and 1 on 12 targets against LA. Again, Likely 3,500, really, really strong spot for him. Jake, if you can, please, sir, type in the Eagles. And this is a repeat. We got Cowboys Eagles on Sunday Night Football. Best game of the week, 53 over under. Can you believe it? Total over 50. It's almost hard to believe when you see it under.
What year is this?
I know, right? Is it 2020 again when every total was like 48 or higher? That was, it feels like forever ago at this point. But this matchup, once again, Jake, I think you and I were all over this a couple weeks ago. But this matchup just really favors A.J. Brown. We were talking about 1 high versus 2 high, and A.J. Brown has been really, really sensitive to 2 high coverages. And that's, again, simply because Jalen Hurts isn't chucking it deep as near as often. And when he does, those looks are typically, bracket coverage because the safety is deep. Against single high safety looks this year, A.J. Brown is averaging an absurd 3.9 yards per route run. That's third best among all wide receivers. Only Tyreek Hill and Nico Collins are better. But that dips to just 2.04 yards per route run against 2 high coverages. Again, fewer explosive plays. Devonta Smith on the flip side has been awesome against 2 high. He's been one of the best wide receivers in the NFL against 2 high. But Dallas is, they stick to their guns. They play a lot of cover 1 man. They play a lot of cover 3. And that leads to a lot of single high safety looks. So Sunday night game for showdown, A.J. Brown, just spam him back into lineups. The last note I have here, if you could please, Sir Jake, type in the Steelers. And I know we don't really want to talk about the Thursday night game, but I do have a decent angle here on George Pickens. He has had some insanely sensitive 1 high safety splits. He has basically been like one of the league's most inefficient receivers when he faces 2 high. Again, he's one of these splash play guys when defenses roll safeties back and 2 high safety looks. Going to get fewer explosive plays. He's 68th of 77 players in yards per route run against 2 high, but that jumps to 10th. He's the 10th best wide receiver this season, according to our data. Against single high safety looks, Patriots play a lot of single high, nearly 60%, play a lot of man coverage. It's Mitch Trubisky. It takes a massive leap of faith. This duo is connected on just 2 of the 7 targets they've had. It's not been great so far. I'll say that much. But if you are looking for an angle on Thursday night, I do think Pickens is solid. Deontay Johnson is also really good against man coverage. He just gets open. But yeah, we're just going to be searching for some catchable targets for Mitch Trubisky, unfortunately.
Hey, if you're playing showdown slate, you got to put somebody in the captain. You might as well put Pickens in there, right?
He's got ceiling for sure. That's about the best we can say though for this game for a 30-point total game.
If Goddard comes back, or how real? I guess I should ask how real are the splits with Goddard out. Smith, we've seen Smith thrive. I know he was possible to come back last week, never really threatened. I think he was doubtful as the last we saw him. I don't know if he ever got upgraded to questionable. But how much does that hurt Smith, if at all? I guess it does to some degree if Goddard comes back on Sunday night.
Yeah, it definitely does, man. I mean, Goddard got into limited practice on Friday, and we've seen teams do that this year. If guys are going to miss the game, they're trying to just ramp them up. I think Goddard's going to play, but I tweeted this out last week. I mean, in 8 games now without Goddard, I mean, Devonta Smith's been awesome. I mean, it's been like a clear trend, like 8 or more targets in all 8 games without Dallas Goddard. He's got 60 or more yards in 7 of 8 games. Just really, really strong. Goddard will really help A.J. Brown, like dictating coverage over the middle. That'll really help A.J. Brown again. I think Brown's the best play in that game on Sunday night.
The books never quite caught up with Smith. Like I just kept hitting his over. And like he almost hit his all overs a couple times. I know he cracked 100, I think several times, but he was like in the 60s, maybe high 50s, like mid 60s or something like that.
Yeah, we were spamming that too. It's like 56.5 for the last 3 weeks. We've been giving out in Discord for the last couple of weeks too. But this is firmly an A.J. Brown spot here, especially if Goddard's back.
All right. Speaking of the sports books, I got Britt's picks. I'll give them in just a second, but let's go ahead and fire off who you guys like in the sports books. Graham, feel free to go first.
Sure. Yeah, this was. I'll go ahead and take my stand here. I'm on Texans 5.5. I mean, we've been all over Texans all year. We've been betting against the Jets all year. Apparently, Zach Wilson, maybe doesn't want to start. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see who's under center. But I mean, the last 5 games, guys, just listen to this stat. Last 5 games, the Jets have had 58 possessions. They've had the ball 58 times. They've scored the ball. They've scored 2 touchdowns. 2.
Yeah.
I mean, this offense is like, it's not inept is like a compliment at this point for the Jets. So 5.5 Texans. Britt's on that too. I'm sure that probably would have been his stand. Knowing Britt and doing the show with him all year. One other one I'm on is Broncos at 3. I think they straight up win. I just, outlining why Chargers are looking, pretty dusty with just Keenan Allen, really the only guy available to make explosive plays for them. I'm on Broncos defense, man. I mean, I think they're legit. Pat Surtain is playing extremely, extremely well. Broncos, I'm just going to take the points at 3. This line is a little too high. I'm really surprised Chargers are still getting 3. I'd have this closer to like 1.5.
Shout out to the Broncos, by the way, who had that 70-point mauling by the Dolphins, and everybody thought, like, man, this is the worst defense of all time, and they've kind of bounced back and corrected themselves. By the way, I don't know if you've heard, this might change things. The Jets signed Brett Rippon. I don't know if you want to change your pick. I don't know if Brett Rippon, they got him off the practice squad. Maybe it's Trevor Siemian this week, and like you're talking about the Wilson thing, apparently there was a shouting match with the coach, and it doesn't seem like he's going to be quarterbacking. Not that it matters, right? It doesn't really matter who the quarterback is for the Jets. It's somebody inept, but it's not going to be good. Jake, fire away. What do you have as far as your sports book takes this week?
Yeah, love Denver +3. I mean, like Graham outlined, Chargers have just been chronically overvalued in betting markets. And, Denver's looked pretty good the last month or so. And then I also got a prop for Thursday Night Football, Deontay Johnson over 40.5 receiving yards. You can get this at -120 over at PointsBet. I actually got -115 over at Bovada. I'm in Georgia, so unfortunately can only bet offshores. But New England is the third softest schedule-adjusted matchup for opposing outside wide receivers since week 7. I know they generally have had a reputation as a great pass defense unit. That just hasn't been true as of late. Deontay's gone over this in 5 of his 8 games this year. And as we saw from the great fantasy points tools, he also has a pretty advantageous schematic matchup against this very man-heavy New England defense.
Looks like he's 39.5 on Prize Picks. I pull up the scores and odds. I'll tell you like the best way. Sometimes it could be a little bit behind as far as time, but if you're in the Prize Pick streets, 39.5 for Deontay Johnson. Let's see. It's up to 43.5 on Bet Rivers, 42.5 on DK, and shop around. Obviously, it goes without saying your biggest edge. One of your biggest edges in prop shopping, or in playing props is shopping those props around. Let's see. Speaking of things such as Prize Picks or Underdog, I know that we have some picks here. It's tricky to get them on a Tuesday night. There's really not a lot out there. I believe, Jake, you have I actually hit it before the show. I didn't know if you're going to move the needle or not. So you have 5 picks, and I picked I boxed these all together. I put some American dollars on it. So give the people 5 winners, hopefully, on Underdog this week.
Yeah, I've been loving some of these early week slips. I mean, you'll get lines that are 10 or 15 yards off of what the books are listing, which is really fantastic. This is an Underdog slip. I got Dak Prescott over 279.5 passing yards, correlated with CeeDee Lamb over 89.5 receiving yards. Cowboys passing attack has just looked unstoppable as of late. And Philadelphia is the league's top pass funnel. And they haven't been defending the pass very well either. So really love that. Those are probably my favorite 2 picks that I've seen on the board so far. Also like David Montgomery under 68.5 rushing yards. The Bears run defense is a bottom 3 matchup by yards per carry allowed. And, we noted the weather concerns. This could be a pretty slow paced game if the weather's ugly. Also like Chuba Hubbard over 49.5 rushing yards. Hubbard had a season high 74% carry share in week 13. Believe it, he landed on 25 carries, and New Orleans is a slightly positive rushing matchup for opposing running backs. And then I also like Travis Kelce over 78.5 receiving yards. I'm not sure if Taylor Swift will be at this game, but Buffalo runs too high at a top 4 rate. And Travis Kelce, more broadly speaking, tight ends in general, but especially Travis Kelce, they see a notable boost against too high because it just opens up more lanes underneath, more holes in the zone underneath. So really like Travis Kelce over 78.5 over at Underdog.
New coaches there in Carolina, so I wanted to see as far as that distribution for the running backs, and it looks like Chuba has separated himself from Sanders, possibly one of the worst free agent signings we've seen in a while. And I guess is it interim guys? I'm not sure who's the coach there in Carolina. It's an interim guy, right? I think it is. I'm not certain. Doesn't matter. But it appears that they're going with Chuba. Graham, did you have a chance? I was looking and I couldn't really find a lot because not a lot of lines are out there. Do you happen to have anything for the people when it comes to the Prize Pick streets, the Underdog streets?
Yeah, I'm unfortunately blocked. I live in Colorado. I've got access to 8 books, Dean, but I can't get into Pick'em streets. It's bizarre. I have not figured out why we can't do the correlated prizes, but it has probably something to do with some sort of government law. But yeah, I was looking at Deontay. I think that makes sense as an over. Weirdly, I love Pickens too as an over on Prize Picks. our guy Tom Brawley in Discord gave out Jaylen Warren over 42.5 rushing yards. That got pulled this afternoon because Najee Harris is dealing with a knee injury. So if Warren gets relined like anywhere south of like 60, I think that would make for a really, really strong bet. I mean, Steelers are probably just going to try to run the ball a ton, and Najee potentially limited or out would be great for Warren. I think FanDuel relined it at 60.5. That's the only number I see. So I might end up taking Warren just over rushing attempts, when those lines are out Wednesday. So that's really all I had for such a what a gross Thursday night game. We got a great one last week, boys. We Seattle Dallas lived so Patriots Steelers could die, I guess. I don't know.
I'm seeing 60.5. I just pulled it up there for FanDuel. And my guess is these other ones have not yet adjusted because I'm seeing 42.5 in DraftKings.
Yeah, those are all pulled.
Probably been pulled. Gotta be pulled.
Yeah, those have been pulled.
Yeah. All right. But I should mention, if you're in the props and pick'em, streets, the props and pick'em package here at RotoGrinders, check out the brand new props and pick'em package. The experts here at RG, the projections team, they take premium stats, they comb through the market, and they look for any inefficiencies through mid-November. NBA, NFL, NHL, they are up 38 units on our expert picks. Using our model, you can easily see which lines are off, where to find them, and how likely the prop will be to hit based on the tool. Just check out the link in the description for more information. We're going to close out and get out of here, but is there any deals going on at the site? Are people still week 14? You probably don't get a lot of people signing up, but Graham, tell the people about Fantasy Points, why they should check it out now for their playoff run, or if nothing else, keep it in mind for next season.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we have been 50% off for basically since November. I think we're even cheaper now for the final few weeks of the season. But yeah, fantasypoints.com. You can get all of our great articles led by John Hansen, Scott Barrett, our guy Joe Dolan, Tom Brawley, myself, Jake Tribbey, who was the writer of the year last year. We've got an incredible staff, and we're all using. Yeah, shout out to Jake Tribbey, man. Great writer, great analyst. And all of our lovely articles, great data is supported by Fantasy Points Data, which you can get a $50 subscription for. Again, there's no reason not to try it. Wide receiver coverage tool, quarterback coverage tool are both free. Kind of give you a taste of what the tools are like, the filters are like. Only $50 get you in for Fantasy Points Data.
I should have shouted out Scott Barrett. That's where I saw that tweet there. Most air yards in any game this season was Elijah Moore. He tweeted out earlier today, 257 air yards.
I love Scott. He's my guy, but this is like his Super Bowl last week. He's Elijah Moore's biggest fan, like literal president of the fan club. So this was probably a Super Bowl moment for him last week with Flacco.
Yeah, he might single-handedly increase Elijah Moore's ownership by 10% in DFS.
He will.
Starts.
Yeah, he will.
Who's he fighting with for president status? Is there other people like, he's mine? Like Elijah's my guy.
Probably Elijah Moore's mom or something like that.
Jake, any plugs? By all means, tell the people where they can find you on Twitter. We'll step aside. We'll get out of here. Hopefully, we gave the people enough winners. They take something down. They let us know. Britt will be back next week, week 15. But Jake, where can the people find you? The writer of the year on the old Twitter and other social you want to give out.
At Jake Tribbey on Twitter. All my content available over at Fantasy Points. Got a great DFS suite for you. My flagship article, DFS Study Hall, comes out Thursday morning. Got DFS values for you Friday. Scott Barrett's DFS breakdown Saturday morning. And then, of course, we have Cashing Points, which I believe is free on YouTube for the rest of the year. Right, Graham?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
So that's our
best show on the internet. Dozens are saying it.
That's our main DFS show. It's generally me, Scott, and Graham just breaking down the slate, all of our thoughts. So that's Friday night at 7. And tons of great stuff over at Fantasy Points.
Give the socials as well, Graham. I didn't mean to slight you. My apologies.
No, absolutely. It's all good, Dean. I'm at Graham Barfield. No underscores there. On X now. I guess we're calling it X. I've merged over. It broke me for like half the year, but I think I've finally gotten it down, and I'm just saying X now. It's not Twitter.
There are so many things to be upset about. Like, this isn't the back of the line. It's like, whatever. That's what we're going to call it these days. It's fine. Yeah. I do have an underscore. I am DFS _ Almanac for producer Steve. No, producer Steve. No. It's producer TJ today. For producer TJ, for Graham, for Jake, for Scott. My apologies, TJ. This was the Prime Point Show presented by Fantasy Points and RotoGrinders. Good luck this week. Win something. We're out of here. Hello.